All right, on this episode of Bowks Talking Bouts, happy to be talking to an individual who is getting ready to make that pro debut, doing so at 145 pounds, and that is happening as part of Rise FC's sixth event. It's going down in Victoria, BC. Russ McCumber getting out there with Isaiah Metituk, and some battle going to be done over at Songhees Wellness Centre over in Victoria, like I said there. And I've got Isaiah on the show. How are you doing there, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I just gotta wonder about how you're feeling leading into this one. I feel like me and you have talked a bit about the whole pro debut thing once or twice, and obviously a lot of factors far beyond your control playing into that there. So can you kind of talk about how you're feeling heading into this pro debut, just with the timeline of all the roadblocks and that kind of context?
You know, it's funny. I was actually thinking right before this interview. It feels like we had this exact same conversation last year when I was getting ready for Unified. So
Yeah.
it's been a long time coming. You know, I've had, like you said, I've had a few roadblocks. I believe this is the seventh time we've attempted to book this pro debut, and now it's finally happening. You know, in a weird way, I almost feel like I've been here before, even though I've never had this pro fight actually happen yet, and fought with the pro rules with the longer rounds and the knees and elbows and everything. I've prepared for this. I've been through the camps. I know what the nerves feel like. I know what to expect now. So at this point, really, I've played this level, and now I'm just waiting to go slay this final boss. And this time, the final boss is Russ McCumber. So let's go slay.
Yeah, and you mentioned just the timing of the, unified talk and stuff like that, and just the unfortunate, last minute cancellation of that event. What would you say like the biggest differences are between the Isaiah Metituk that was readying to make his pro debut then versus what we're going to see in the cage coming up in really a few days' time?
You know, obviously, with the year-long layoff, even with the pandemic, I mean, it is cliche, but I'm a completely different fighter. I've got great patina running my strength and conditioning now. So, I've gone from looking like a little kid with a bag of milk body to actually looking like a professional athlete and actually getting some strength and some power behind my game. And then behind that, I've also been working a ton with Randy Mahood on my striking, because that's always been my weakest link. I'm obviously almost all my wins are by submission, so I'm a good grappler, but I've never had the striking to go with it, and everything we've worked on is specific for my game, and it's really going to show come fight night that I've added a whole another layer to my game. And then even beyond that, that's just the physical. I think even more importantly, mentally, I'm light years beyond what I was last year, just in terms of my approach and how I'm viewing this and how I'm taking everything in leading to it. So I really, really believe that now, truly, I'm ready to go in there and show that I'm the future of Canadian MMA.
Yeah, and you've had different posts that kind of articulate that growth and just, trying to make certain lifestyle changes to, reflect in the career. Like I was noticing, it seems like you've pulled a fair bit back from like drinking and stuff like that. Not that you seem to like hit it that heavy prior, but it seems like just a clean slate in that regard. Like what other lifestyle changes have you kind of added on board in addition to that? And is that a fair characterization with the, phasing out of alcohol and some other things of the sort?
Yeah, so for me, I never drank regularly, especially obviously when I had a fight coming up. I'd usually cut it out 8 to 10 weeks before. But then, I'd have a weekend or two of just debauchery where, after the fight, I'd go out, I'd get blackout drunk that Friday, that
Sure, yeah.
Saturday, that week I'd be partying all week. Not that it was interfering with fighting, but it's that much harder to get back in the gym when, your body's in that mode opposed to, your chicken and spinach and you're training twice a day with no alcohol and all of that. So there was that factor that played into it. And now too, I'm a professional. I need to be ready at all times. With this fight, I mean, my fight got canceled. I still stayed the course. I still made training. I didn't go off my diet. I didn't change anything just in case something like this happened. And, it would be a real shame for something 6, 7, 8 fights down the road, the UFC comes calling almost with like a Tristan Connolly type situation where, hey, we've got something in 13 days notice. Can you make it? And I have to turn it down because, I've been drinking and I'm out of shape and all of that. And I really feel like on a whole that speaks to just the maturation process I've gone through waiting for this debut to finally happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned Randy Mahan, who, presumably great wealth of information and stuff like that. Just a guy who's had a few pro fights under his belt and everything like that, and just like a nuanced game overall. But it seems like there's obviously a bit of a maybe curious dynamic with training nowadays. What's the training dynamic like over at like Champion Gym? Like, is it more like small groups, like, or do you have to like arrange like different like one-on-one kind of sessions or whatever? I only ask because like certain interviews I've done, even with fighters like around here, just throughout Canada and stuff like that. There's different like maybe bylaw officers coming by or certain things like that. So like, what's the training dynamic over at Champion Gym nowadays?
We've had to change everything. I mean, I feel like even if you're not an athlete trying to go to a gym and trying to train, everybody's life in general has changed, just in the way we approach things day to day. But we've managed to work around it, and I'm still getting in work with, Bill Mahood, Randy, like you mentioned, Gray, obviously, Alex Martinez, Luis Martinez. So I've still been able to get in the proper work, if not better quality work, than before. So nothing has really changed in terms of how ready I am or how ready I'm feeling.
Yeah, you touch on something interesting there. Like maybe it's an even better dynamic. Does that maybe just speak to like more of an individual one-on-one attention kind of dynamic, or like what would be the, I guess, beneficial aspects you've gotten from this recent training methodology?
I think partially, in some ways, it's good when you have a lot of guys fighting because you can really channel off each other's energy, and you can push each other because you're all working towards that same goal. With not so many fight cards happening, not as many guys getting ready for fights, we're able to kind of tune what we're doing in each class towards each guy. When Alex Martinez fought in December, everything we did for that last 5 or 6 weeks was geared towards him. And ironically enough, we actually drilled a ton of the high elbow guillotine, which he ended up finishing the guy with. So now that I'm kind of the only guy with a fight on the radar, and now that it's actually happening, everything we've been able to drill has been specific for whichever opponent I was getting ready to face for Rise. So in that way, it's been really nice that I get to be a little selfish, and everything is drilled towards what I'm doing, but at the same time, I'm not taking away from any of my teammates because it's still really valuable knowledge that can benefit everybody.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what you're thinking about being on this specific card here, because I think this is a great one to be making a pro debut, just even in terms of the name value for the specific show, like Theodoru versus Dwyer, which I think anyone throughout Canada can notice and understand that's a big marquee, but Rise FC just doing great things in general on more of like a macro promotional level. So how are you feeling just being on this card and being in the Rise fold in general?
It's cool, man. I mean, like you touched on it, Elias versus Matt those are two UFC veterans, and guys who have both won fights in the UFC. I believe Elias only lost like twice in the UFC. Dwyer won with the Superman punch and got a KO of the night bonus. So those are two legit, bona fide UFC veterans, and that's a sick fight. And there's going to be a lot of eyes on that for sure. And then two, the fact that this is the first Canadian MMA card we've had in at least a year, if not more. They're kind of the first ones that are getting everything up back and running, so there's going to be a ton of eyes on this card. And it's after the performance I put on and the fight me and Russ have, and when I leave with my hand raised, those eyes are going to follow me, and it's going to really, really explode Isaiah Metituk MMA.
Yeah, and you mentioned your opponent, Russ McCumber, a guy who, like yourself, has like a wealth of amateur experience with, him having close to a dozen AMI fights there and getting ready to make the pro debut. A few submission wins to his credit too, guillotine and arm triangle from what I'm noticing. What are your thoughts on his skill set and what he brings to the table? You strike me as a guy that like studies the field pretty closely. So like, what are your thoughts on his skill set overall?
He's tough, man. He's a gritty, durable kid. He's been around even longer than I have, which is not something you see a lot of nowadays. I mean, I had my first fight at 19, and I feel like he's in the same boat. So, it's two tough, experienced amateur veterans, both making their pro debuts. He comes from a really legit camp in Zoom MMA with, Adam Zuchek and Sarah Kaufman. So he's got some really legitimate guys beside him, and I'm excited, man. This isn't going to be an easy fight where I go in and I walk through them in under a minute like Peter Jansen or Ryan Moore. I'm banking on a 3-round war. I'm ready to come out looking like I was in a car crash, but it's all worth it when I get my hand raised. So I'm excited to step in there and go to war.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd even had a post where you described him as your most dangerous opponent to date, but it seemed like something that was like a motivating, light the fire in you kind of factor more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I went from, like, I have no shame in admitting it, when I fought Albar, I knew how dangerous he was, and I knew how good of a striker he was. And that kind of screwed with me mentally just because I'd never had to prepare for a guy like that. And I think falling back to what we were talking about earlier with the maturation and the different viewpoint and everything, now I'm excited. I'm excited to go in there and have a fight of the night and steal a show and show that, I'm durable, I'm tough, I'm gritty, I've got stand-up, I've got wrestling, I've got jiu-jitsu, I've got it all, because that's going to take every aspect of my game to put him away, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I mean, I can even see the growth in there a little bit too. Just you talking about the Albera fight, the way that you're talking about it now, it seemed like there was like an obvious like sore spot for a bit, and maybe like not an aversion to talking about it per se, but maybe there's other conversations you'd rather have. But now, just speaking to the mental growth, it's just you're talking about it on a productivity, galvanize your efforts and skill set kind of level.
You know, Here's the thing with amateur MMA. I mean, obviously, if you have a record that's 0-7, maybe it's not for you. But at the end of the day, most guys that are in that are taking it serious, we're preparing for pro, and you get a new record anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I learned to let that one go. I came out of that. Obviously, I was beyond disappointed that I lost and I didn't get to add an amateur title to my resume. And, I was haunted by that loss. I mean, I had nightmares about it every day almost for probably 2 months. I was borderline suicidal. Like, it really did mess with me mentally. And then it kind of just clicked one day that, everything that I learned from that fight and how much I grew from it was all kind of part of God's plan, and that in the long term, it really, really benefited me. And like you said prior, we're seeing it now to where I learned, don't be afraid. Don't doubt yourself. As cliche as it sounds, don't do any of that leading into a fight. And I learned a lot of that from the Albara fight, because when that door shut, all those negative thoughts are still there. And heading into this fight, I don't have any of those. I just have a sense of pride and joy and excitement and knowing that I'm ready and that I can take whatever he throws at me and throw something back twice as hard. So it's definitely come tenfold.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear things got as rough as they did at that one point there, but I mean, like, to reiterate the point, it seems like you just really used that moment to learn a lot. And yeah, it seems like you're in a very just freed kind of state nowadays, and it seems like a lot of the talk is centered around just the mental aspect and the composure and everything like that. Obviously, having guys like, Kajan Johnson and past efforts, and you mentioned Bill Mahood too, like that has to pay dividends for the mental game. But are there any other aspects of like sports psychology that you have in your game? Like is there any like reading of motivational books or any kind of like sports psychology efforts that are integrated outside of that? Or is it just the fact that you're so interconnected with so many amazing Canadian martial artists?
It definitely helps. Obviously, like you said, on my team, I've got Bill, Randy, Gray. Alex Martinez is another really good one. He's always given me good books to read and spreading that positive energy that I'm really, really big on lately, because it's helped me just mature and grow so much. But even beyond that, I've got a lot of really good guys that are on my team, but not necessarily on our team per se, like Jesse Arnett. I'm sure everybody knows by now that, he's basically a big brother to me. I lived with him for 2 Kyle Prepelek, Tom Theocarsi, you just had on your show. I've surrounded myself with some really incredible people, so I've got so many different brains to pick and so many guys to get good knowledge and good info from, that it's really kind of molded me into where I am today.
Yeah, some great shout outs there. Tom Theocaris, Big Cat. I mean, all those guys just rock solid individuals for sure. But you're always, or at least pretty regularly, making predictions for MMA Empire. Do you have a particular prediction for this fight, or is it just the more general sense of what you were talking about before, where it's like, I'm happy, I'm just looking to get out there and kind of compete and just feel all the associated stimuli with that? Like, do you have a particular prediction for this one, or is it just more getting out there and doing the damn thing, as it were?
I'm not just happy with that, though. I don't want this fight to be centered around, oh, I've had to wait 2 years and all the roadblocks, and hey, I'm still here, because none of that means jack shit if I don't get my hand raised. At the end of the day, I'm not just doing this for a feel-good story, because 9 times out of 10, those don't happen in sports. I'm putting that in the rear view, and now I'm focused on going in there and taking out a very tough, very dangerous Russ McCumber, because that's what's going to make me happy, and that's what's going to be the feel-good moment. I'm ready for a 3-round war, a car crash of a fight, and I know whether it's a submission, a knockout, whether I have to grind out a hard decision, all I know is no matter how much blood is shed, whether it's mine, his, both, that I'm leaving with my hand raised and a win to start my pro career.
Yeah, it's been a cool story to follow along with, man. Like, I mean, being at Champion there since you were 15, and then you mentioned the time living with Jesse Arnett and just all the different moments and just the pro debut readjustments and stuff like that. You're finally at this moment teetering on the precipice of getting out there for the pro debut, and it was just great getting to talk to you ahead of this. So just to the point of being mindful of your schedule, man, is there anything you'd like to sort of add as a parting thought as we're wrapping up here?
Yeah, thank you to all my team at Champion Gym, BPM Fitness. Thank you to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Thank you to everybody who still believes in me and still is stuck with me through this crazy roller coaster of a ride just to get to this fight. And you want to see a fight of the night, you want to see the future of Canadian MMA, you tune in March 13th to Rise FC 6 at the Songhees Wellness Centre in Victoria, BC, and you're going to see what I'm all about, and you're going to see my hand raised.
We got Rise FC 6, Theodore versus Dwyer top in the marquee, but I'm very excited for this fight between Russ McCumber and Isaiah Metituk, two pro debutantes that are just really locked in and have a wealth of experience that belies the fact that they're making their pro debut, and I think definitely has potential to be fight of the night, man. So thanks for all the time and insights ahead of this one, to reiterate, and just best of luck in the remaining part of the preparations, and have a good rest of your day too.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.